that particular day, there was a worker up there on top of that platform, an iron worker doing some welding. And when time came for him to take a break, he slid the rail. What that means is you climb over the edge, you grab a hold of the I-beam, and you slip down the rail. Highly illegal as far as construction terms. OSHA will fine you for it if they catch you doing it. Contractor will just fire you. There were ladders in all of these elevator lobbies. This is one of 4 elevator shafts that were in the building, and each one of them had a series of ladders in them for workers to get up. And so you can see how far he was from that elevator shaft, not far at all, but instead he chose to slide the rail. And so as he slid that tall rail, he lost his grip up high. And at the bottom, we had these rebar stakes. And that one that the arrow is pointed at, he wound up free falling and kind of going off to the side. They had the little OSHA caps on them, and they're designed to protect you if you're walking by and you stumble and you fall on that rebar sticking up. You'll not get injured because of that OSHA cap on top of it. They don't do much for a 32-foot free fall, I'll tell you. I saw the ambulance come, heard all the siren activity. After the ambulance left, the site superintendent, the contractor's superintendent came over and he said, "I need to show you what happened." So he took me down there, and there were blood stains and shards of bone and flesh down about 8 inches on that, and that OSHA cap was pushed down. It had gone up into his posterior, and very, very serious injury. And of course, as the building engineer, that was part of my job to take those kind of reports back to the administration at Focus on the Family and let them know on a daily basis what had happened out on the project that day. So that was a big part of my report the next day, as you can imagine.
So even with those preventative measures in place, even with following the OSHA guidelines, even with having all those things, all those boxes checked, if you will, things can still go wrong. Things can still wind up happening. And so that event was kind of an eye-opener to you?
It was more of an eye-opener than I would know for years. I mean, part of the reason it was an eye-opener was not only because I recognized how quickly somebody can get hurt on a construction site. And I'd grown up in rural, I'd grown up around farm machinery, so I always knew that just one slip can be a serious life-changing thing. But the thing about this in a commercial environment was the contractor understands things like policies and procedures. And everybody who worked on that site had to go through a safety briefing. And if you've ever been on a construction site, you see all these hard hats with stickers all over them. Those are the sites that people are qualified to work on, meaning they've been through the security procedures for that site. And if a superintendent sees you with a hard hat that doesn't have his sticker on it for his site, he'll shut you down and say, "What are you doing on my construction site?" Because you got to understand there's 250 hard hats running around, and the general contractor doesn't know all of them. So he's walking around looking for people who don't have the sticker for his site, and he will shut you down if you don't have a safety sticker for his site. So that's in their policies and their procedures. And they also understand consequences. And, the thing about this guy, it was horseplay. He was absolutely doing horseplay. OSHA quickly figured that out. They interviewed everybody who was in the area of his injury. They went through all of the written records of people going through safety training and all that. And they said, hey, since this is horseplay, we're going to cover your medical expenses. So the guy was in the hospital for weeks. It was a very serious injury. It was a life-changing injury. He was in the hospital for weeks. All that was paid. He went into years of physical therapy. That was paid for. It changed his lifestyle. He could no longer work in the capacity that he did. Had it not been horseplay, there would have been some compensation for that as well. But because it was determined to be horseplay, he was not going to get anything for years of life-changing injury. He wasn't happy about that, as you can imagine. He sued the ambulance drivers who took him to the hospital. He sued the emergency room. He sued the hospital. He sued the architect, the general contractor, the subcontractor that he was working for. He sued Focus on the Family. And none of those entities that he sued were culpable in this. And he had an attorney whispering in his ear, "Oh, we can make you a lot of money." He got nothing, because it was his fault. He couldn't accept that. But because the contractor had policies and procedures in place, we avoided a major bullet there. Otherwise, there may have been ways that Focus on the Family and the general contractor and the architect could have been sued if there weren't all those policies and procedures in place. So that was a real wake-up call to me on putting policies and procedures together. Does that make sense, Matt?
Oh, absolutely. And so those moments where, again, something gets our attention, makes us think differently about the world and about our position in it, we need to pay attention to those. And my understanding is that wasn't the only eye-opening experience that you had along this journey.
It wasn't, because in those days, my lesson learned from this is always go with AIA standards, which is Architects International Association, something like that. They have all these forms for policies and procedures of building. My mindset was still in construction. So I was so glad that we'd done all that, and I knew we're never again going to build a building without having done all that stuff that I may have at one time thought was ridiculous red tape and paperwork. So it confirmed in me that this was a good thing to do, was to have these policies and procedures by AIA protocol. And so, that's the way we move forward as we build other buildings. And we went on, we always made sure that all these policies and procedures were in place. But even then, Matt, I hadn't transferred that to the owner's responsibility. Once all the construction team and the architects and all those fun people to work with, once they're gone, we've got a building. Now it's our responsibility to keep our people safe. I hadn't yet made that complete connection. And yes, through the committee, we had done these small things like set up a great fire alarm system and have the suicide call alert and had a security guard or position and had 16 or maybe it was 32 cameras at first. I don't remember. I think it was 16 cameras we started with for a 253,000 square foot building and another 157,000 square foot across the parking lot. So, we learned some of those things the hard way because we moved into the building in August of 1993. And we went through a couple of years of what we call the shakedown cruise. In a new building, there's always things that don't work here and there, and you go through the first couple of years of warranty with your general contractor and work the bugs out. We got through those couple of years, and then another event happened that got our attention and got the attention of building owners across the nation, and that was the Oklahoma City bombing. And that in itself had a profound impact on me. As the building engineer for Focus on the Family, I really became aware through that we had an obligation, now that we were living in the building, to keep our people safe. And not only was it my observation, it was the executive wing's observation. And because of what happened on April 19th, 95, they put together a committee, and they wanted to ask the questions, what if it happened here? And they asked this committee, and I was part of the 4-person committee, to take a hard look at our buildings and our processes, and let's see what we can do to avoid that here. So we put together a ministry-wide risk vulnerability analysis. I had never heard of that term in my life, but as we began studying the best way to move forward, we worked with ASIS, which is a big membership association of security people. We worked with ASIS to see what's the best way of proceeding here. And we knew we needed to do a ministry-wide risk vulnerability analysis. So we began doing that, and that involved doing an emergency action plan and interviewing every department in the ministry to find out what their vulnerabilities were. And I'll never forget that I submitted the budget for the recommendations. When you have a committee, there's going to be a budget number come out of that. And we put together a budget, and I took it to the vice president that I reported to on May 2nd, 1995. That's how quickly we put together this risk vulnerability analysis and came up with the recommended procedures. And one of the things we decided was that facilities, the group that I worked in, was going to provide all the capital for all these projects that we identified. The security side of things would manage the installed components and all of the procedures. And we did. We involved every department in the ministry. And so we submitted the budget in May of 1995, May 2nd, 1995. Like a church, it takes time to go through the process. First, our vice president had to look it over 2 or 3 times and come back to me and say, what if we change it? He wanted it to be one page that he could take upstairs for a board meeting and say, this is our recommendations for enhancing security at Focus on the Family. And I know there's people out there that'll shake their heads in disgust and say there's no way you can do that for a 253,000 square foot building with 1,300 people in it. Yes, you can. Just follow your orders. So it was a one-page document with things that we must do, things that if there's more money left over, we'd really like to do these things. And a third category was, boy, if next year is a great giving year and we have lots of money, let's do this too. Well, you're never going to get that third row. It ain't going to happen in any ministry. I doubt. We didn't get that. We got some of the things in the second category. We got everything in the first category. But the interesting thing is, and many of people watching this can relate, it didn't come up in the board meeting until October of 92. That's when it got on the board for the agenda and got on the agenda for the board. And so we got the things approved that were approved, and then I started through the design system of this. And now one of the things that had been approved was an improvement to our panic alarm system. We had panic buttons throughout the building, and the way they worked is that if somebody hit a panic button, it would send an alarm in the form of a little speaker in the wall, a buzzer, and lights on a light bar of two offices. One was the security guard, the other was an assistant to the president upstairs that the security guard reported to. Well, if both of those guys were out of the office, which happened a lot, and somebody hits a panic button, nobody's coming because nobody knows they've hit a panic button. So one of the things we decided in our committee was that ain't good enough. We designed a system where when somebody hit a panic button or a fire alarm went off, either of the two, that there would be a signal sent through this electronic box, and we used a Zetron auto dialer, and it would automatically interrupt all radio transmissions and come over the radios of all my security team or all my facilities team and all of the security guys, which was two. We had the security operator and the assistant to the president, which was his boss. And it would go, I had 8 of those radios in the facilities department, and part of the program that developed out of that Oklahoma City analysis that we did at Focus was we decided one security guard ain't enough. If there's something serious going on, facilities group becomes security backup. So because of that interface between facilities and security, all of our radios, mine and 7 guys that worked with me, worked for me at that time, would get an alert on the radio. Now, to design all this took electrical engineers. It took several meetings with the Zetron supplier and our radio supplier, working out the way to do all this. These days, it's so much easier. This was 1995 that we were designing it. These days, there are companies that specialize in that. I researched a couple of them for everybody. SecureX is one that can do all of that and more. And another is Push Pulse. There's companies out there now that you can go to where you don't have to hire an electrical engineer to come up with a full design of multiple components that all handshake together. So I wanted to put a couple of those up for folks to see that there are some good options for putting in effective panic alert systems. And some of these can even automatically notify law enforcement. Exactly 1 year after I submitted the budget to my vice president, May 2nd, 1996, it was the National Day of Prayer. And it was about 1:56 in the afternoon. Our system had not even been tested. Our fire alarm portion of it had, I said 1:56, it was 1:26 p.m. I misspoke that, 1:26 p.m. We had also, out of that analysis, we had changed our entire fire alarm to be a positive alarm sequence, PAS. And for any of you who have a large facility and have been concerned about attacks similar to Jonesboro, Arkansas, where students pulled the fire alarm, pulled people out of the building, and then had their snipers in the woods starting to shoot them. That was one of the things that we looked at, is the possibility of the fire alarms being used to pull Dr. Dobson and others out of the building and make them vulnerable. A positive alarm sequence means a lot of things. I won't go into it, but it basically means when one fire alarm is pulled, nothing happens except those radios that I just mentioned get an alert, and the people on them are trained with how to look for where the fire alarm is coming from, and they're given 180 seconds to disable that alarm before it goes off. We were the first building in Colorado Springs to initiate positive alarm sequence. The fire marshal himself had never heard of it and really resisted us, but we were able to provide case studies where it had been done in other major areas, especially in hospitals and with retirement homes and Alzheimer's units and all kinds of stuff. It was starting to happen across the country, and he finally accepted our program. But look into positive alarm sequence. We had done all the testing on that. We knew that was going to work, but we hadn't tested our panic alarm system yet. That portion of it, where the panic alarms were set off and would radio us, we hadn't tested yet. But one of the things we knew is that we were getting about 250,000 guests per year at Focus on the Family. We were the second most visited tourist site in Colorado Springs, second only behind the Air Force Academy right across the freeway from us. So we knew that the chances of one of our people who would get an alarm on his radio very well may be right next to a tour guide who's taken 30, 40, 50 people through the building explaining this is what happens here. And we did not want that radio to go off and say, alarm, bookstore, front desk. We wanted it to just simply say a location. If you got a recording of a location from our facilities manager, it was his voice, and it would come over in a pre-recorded message, administration building, front desk. Everybody with the radio knew where to go and knew to get there quick. But we hadn't done any drills. And about 1:26 on May 2nd, my radio went off and said administration building, front desk. And Matt, I truly thought that it was some secretary wondering, what's this button do? And I sat at the top of those stairs. You can see those stairs there. This picture is taken from the lower level of the 3-level building. And my office was just on the second level, just off to the left side from the top of those stairs. I immediately got up and I came down the stairs, and I came up to this partial height reception area here because I knew that's where those panic buttons were. And this is a little half height door right here on the back side. I came clear up to the desk, never looking up because I was looking down at my watch, trying to time how long it would take me to get there if this was a real issue. And I walked right up to the desk, and I thought 17 seconds, not bad. I could be here pretty quick if there was a real issue. And I look up, and I'm face to face with a gun. And I just felt stupid. I had no idea what to say. This guy is very angry. He's got a gun in his right hand. I could see the ladies there were obviously very distraught. And I was listening to him, but it was surreal. I was hearing him say in a very loud voice, I don't remember if he was really yelling it, but seemed loud to me. You better blankety blank get your blanking people out of the blankety blank building or I'll blow it up. And I looked in his left hand, there was a trigger device. It was a piece of pipe, as I recall, maybe about that long, with a wooden dowel pin sticking in the end of it, and a little peg coming off the side. And from it was a coil of wire that went to this big green army duffel bag on the floor, in which he claimed were explosives. And he was saying, if you do anything to try to stop me, my finger will come off this trigger and it'll detonate all those explosives and it'll bring the building down. So that's how he's how he's describing himself and his intentions to us. And I just stood there feeling stupid. I hadn't planned for this. Yeah, we'd sat in committee meeting after committee meeting after Oklahoma City talking about what if. But Matt, I still didn't think it was going to happen here.
Yeah. So you're still not thinking that this is a possibility.
Right.
And this guy walks in with a duffel bag, with a trigger and wire and a handgun, and you wind up coming downstairs and never seeing him. I mean, that's kind of a normalcy bias if I've ever heard of one.
Yeah. And even the ladies at the front desk, you got to understand, with 250,000 visitors a year, there were lots of visitors coming in through the day, and they'd sign in here. Well, they didn't even actually sign in those days, and the ladies would say, are you here to be a part of a tour? And if so, they would sign them up for a tour. But other people would come in and just go up the stairs to some appointment that they have. Well, this guy had walked around them and walked over here and sat down. There were some couches behind here that you can't see from this diagram. He'd sat there for quite a while and then got up, came over, walked in through this door, plopped his bag of alleged explosives down in front of the door, and told them they're not going anywhere for a while. And so that's when, and pulled out the gun. And that's when they had activated the panic button. And so Mike, the security guard, had come out from his office, which is off to the left-hand side of where we can see here. He'd walked up to this side of the gunman, just as I had walked up to the other side. So by this time, the gunman is turning back and forth between Mike and I. He's unhappy. He's feeling caged a little bit. He's very distraught. He's angry. Others who were carrying radios started showing up. The assistant to the president, 7 people in facilities who also had radios. They're all showing up. And here's a part of the police report that I turned in to them. I won't go into the names, but JB and LK were the 2 receptionists. He had them facing towards each other. He was sitting over there in front of that little half-height door. And then he had Mike and I, the security guard. He made us each stand at specific places. And throughout the hostage ordeal, I would occasionally approach the front desk. I'd keep trying to get closer to it, and I'd get clear up where I could put my arms on it. And I was just trying to give assurance to the 2 receptionists. And then he'd point the gun at me and say, back off. And so I'd back up a little bit. And Mike was standing. This was brilliant on Mike's part. He was standing in the doorway of his office where he could see everything with his right eye, but the gunman could not see his left ear. And Mike had a telephone right here on the desk, and he was in touch with the developing command center outside through his telephone. And he could pick up the phone and talk on his left ear and choose times to move his lips when the gunman wasn't looking at him, and give the outside command center real good information as all this was developing. So he had a very good and effective position, but that's kind of how we were laid out